Okay, we have the skeleton and the model is now skinned. So let's take a look at updating the skin weights. Really quick question for you now. How would you like to help support the future of this channel and keep these videos free? Well, there are a few options. One would be to simply treat me to a coffee at my coffee page as a quick and easy thank you. You could also grab something from the antCGi store or one of my other online stores like CubeBrush and Gumroad. This is where you will also find the course files that go with this course, so you can download them and follow along. However, for as little as 99p a month, you could join the antCGi club. There are a few ways you can join. You could head over to my Patreon or Coffee pages, or alternatively simply hit that join button below this video. In short, the more support I get, the more time I can dedicate to creating more high quality content just for you. To get more information on how you can help, follow the link on the screen or in the description below. Okay, now that's out of the way, let's get on with the video. The first thing to do is quickly pose the character. Just use rotations for now. We want to see how the current weights are looking. It's usually best to work on the weights with the area posed. So we can see here that the knee needs work. Let's pose the arm too. So we can now see how broken the model is looking with the default weights. The way I tackle weighting is to first block in the main areas around each joint. So let's start with the pelvis. I will probably speed up the video in some sections from here onwards, so don't worry if it looks like I'm working really quickly. Set opacity and value to 1 so we can assign exact full weights. To adjust the brush size, simply hold down B and scrub with the left mouse button. So we know that the crotch area needs to be fully weighted here, so work your way around. Up over the hip and around the back. This is just rough, remember. And just stick with the left side for now. Right click on the next joint up and choose Select Influence. We can see that this has quite a big influence, so let's pull some of this back for now. Set value to 0 so we can remove the influence instead of add it. And let's paint out this section. We could use a harder brush here too. All we want is the section which the joint is spanning weighted. Paint out this down here. Okay, next joint. And let's remove this area here. Okay, so we focus mainly on the left side, so let's update the right now. All we need to do is select the model and go to Skin, Mirror Skin Weights and open the options. What this will do is mirror the weighting values across the model for us. YZ is the axis we're going to mirror across, and this is the same setting we used when we mirrored the joints. And we need to mirror from the positive side to the negative, so left to right. There are lots of other options to play with here. Closest point on surface will match the weights to the closest point on the opposite side of the model. Raycast uses a fancy raycasting algorithm to decide the best points to sample from each side. Closest component will match the closest vertices. With a symmetrical model like ours, the default options are fine. For more advanced mirroring options, you can also choose how the components on either side are associated with each other. But for us, again, the default settings will work. And finally, we can choose to normalize the weight values when mirrored, to make sure they stay between 0 and 1. We can leave this for now. If I apply this now, you see we get some errors with the model. The vertices on the right side have jumped away from the model because the weights haven't mirrored correctly. This is because the left side is posed, so we need to reset it. Okay, that's reset. Now let's try again. So if we look at the weights now, you can see they are symmetrical. Now we have the main areas blocked in, we just need to soften the influence so when he bends, he won't end up with angular sections. To do this, all I'm going to do is use the smooth paint operation. There we can see it softening, so there's more of a gradual influence. Looks like we missed a section here. Let's make sure this is fully weighted to the pelvis, and then soften the edges. There was once a time when I'd hate painting weights using Mayer's built-in tools. The issue was mainly when using smooth, the weights would seemingly be applied randomly all over the model, so I'd end up chasing the weights around the model. It was frustrating at times. That was until I discovered that changing weight distribution in the bind skin options to neighbour kept the weights close to the selected joint, which is essential when using smooth. So if you're having issues, try changing it. Okay, now we have one side done, we can just mirror the weights across. Let's pose the leg again so we can see how this area deforms. Not too bad, but there's too much of a crease. Okay, let's see how the thigh twist joint is looking. So it's pretty solid here, and there are some rogue weights, so let's remove those. Let's use replace. Oops, forgot to change the value. We want it to be 0 because we are removing the influence. That's better. Okay, let's remove this up here too. Now let's soften the crease a little more. There's too much of an angle up here. Let's switch back to replace. And let's use a smaller opacity this time, so we can gradually paint away the influence. And a softer brush. We want to reduce the weights here to close this gap. That's looking slightly better. If you remember, we had to add these twist joints separately, so there won't be any default weighting on them. So what we need to do now is add their influence. All we're going to do is follow the same process we did with the spine, and you will see that this is how I approach most of my weights. First, we block in the area with some solid weights, so we have a value of 1, and also opacity set to 1. Let's follow these two edge loops around the thigh. Maybe widen it. Okay, so that is now moving the model. It's a little harsh though, but we can easily soften it back in. First, pose it so we can see the changes. Now use the smooth paint operation to blend it into the rest of the thigh. That looks a lot better. Okay, let's look at the knee. We can see that the back of the knee collapses too much. So, select the knee joint as the influence so we can see the weights. Okay, so there's a lot of influence up here we need to pull back. Swap to replace this time. Set value to 0. And let's also use a smaller opacity so we can work gradually. We just need to work on the back of the knee, so gradually paint those values to reduce them. We could maybe use a higher opacity, and also a harder brush, otherwise we're going to be here all day. Okay, this is looking better. The thigh is filling back out. Let's work on the top too. We have more of a defined crease now. We can use smooth now to soften this back in, but we will need to check how this deforms when the leg animates later. Okay, so we have another twist joint here with no influence. So we can just do exactly the same as we did above. Use the replace paint operation with opacity and value set to 1. And just block in the rough area. Now let's select the knee. So the knee is affecting this section down here, so we need to remove that. Set value to 0 and just paint that out. I'm going to check the thigh joint again actually, as I suspect the same has happened with that, and it's also affecting the knee. Yep, we can see it here. We need to remove this. This area should only be affected by the knee and the twist joint. Let's soften this now. I'm going to go back and double check the twist joint now to see how that's changed things. That's looking okay. We just need to smooth some areas now to stop it looking so angular. So maybe gone a bit too far. We don't need the influence on the lower leg, so we can reduce that now to close the gap again. Okay, so I could spend more time in this area, refining the shape, but I'll move on for now. I hope you're getting a general idea of how we work. Let's just check the calf. Okay, so that's influencing quite a lot of the leg. Let's pose it so we can see what it looks like bent. We can see there is quite a break here. Okay, this needs to be influenced more by the knee twist joint. Let's block this in. Something like that. And now smooth both ends. Maybe add some influence back here. Okay, next twist joint. Again, we have no influence here, so we need to add some in. We also need to remember to update the lower section too, so the twist joint affects here and not the calf joint. Okay, now we can add in the twist joint's influence. Again, exactly the same as we have done before. Actually, a bit lower. We need this all the way down to the foot. And soften up here so it's not angular as it twists. Okay, looks good. The foot will eventually be rotating with this, so it won't look broken when the rig's built. Okay, looks like we just need to smooth out the foot here, it's too angular. That's a bit better. Let's pose the toes now and work on them. So we want less of an influence here. and down here. Let's increase the influence here so this section of the toe is more solid. We're starting to see why it's important to have cleaner topology. If the edge loops here were better organised, this area would bend in a much nicer way. Something like this setup is ideal. I know these are human fingers, but you should get the idea looking at the topology. So we just want a better crease here, so each section is more defined. Okay, let's look at the claw. Now this may not eventually be rigged, so it's an extra joint I added just to give the animator more flexibility. We can see that it's more grey than white, so we need to update it so it's weighted fully to the toe joint. Actually, let's do something different here. So I'm just going to select the faces of the claw. We hold down Ctrl and right click, bring up the marking menu and convert this selection to vertices. All we need to do now is flood this area with our settings maxed out. That's better. Oh, looks like we missed some verts. Okay, so sometimes this may happen and you may find that the brush just won't catch these tiny vertices. In this instance, we can just select them. Open our component editor. We just want these fully weighted to little toe 3. So set these to 1. Okay, that's fixed. Right, let's look at the big toe now. Actually, let's mirror the weights and see how we are doing first. It looks like we have a bulge up here, so this section is obviously being influenced by the knee joints a bit too much. Let's adjust it so it's pulled back onto the twist joint. So that's better, but too harsh, so we need to smooth it out now around the edges. Just slightly. Okay, that's looking better. Right, let's mirror again. Yeah, much better, but not perfect. I'll come back to these, but you ideally do want a little influence, so the character looks more organic. Let's jump up to the torso and pose it. So we already blocked in the weights here earlier, so it looks like we just need to smooth them now. And up here, we want a nice blend. Now the clavicle. Actually, this has too much of an influence over the body. Let's remove some of that. And let's look at the upper arm twist now, which should affect the shoulder. Remove some of the weights around here. If you aren't sure how a part of the body would look as it deforms, just look at your own. Move your shoulder around and see how much of its movement affects the rest of the torso. We need to update the arm twist joints, just like we did with the leg. I'll come back to those. Let's do some more work on the upper body. So as you can see, all I'm doing is adding, removing, and then smoothing the area. We don't want the clavicle to affect the collar. Instead, we need a crease as the shoulder raises. So let's build up this area. Around here too. And soften it. Let's test the shoulder. Okay, so the armpit is being pushed in too far. So let's add some of the influence back to the clavicle. Fill this back out. And smooth again to blend it in. That's looking better. Now we need some more influence over the top of the shoulder. With an area like the shoulder, it's important to check each direction it will move in. If we rotate it forwards now, we get a crease, which is good, but the clavicle probably needs more of an influence to keep it pushed out. Okay, let's add in the twist joints influence. So block it in first. And then soften it. Let's look at the elbow now. So this has too much of an influence over the upper arm. It should be weighted to the twist joint. Let's add that in. So just fill this out. And now smooth the elbow so we get a nice blend. Okay, so I think you have a good idea now of how we go about painting weights. Personally, I like to block the areas out and then adjust the perimeter weights to soften them or fill them out more if needed. Remember to observe how your own body deforms and try to replicate that with the weights. As mentioned in a previous video, if the model has been built with deformation in mind, like with muscle lines for example and clean topology, you can achieve a much better simulation of the muscles moving beneath the surface of the skin with your skin weights. What I'm going to do now is go through and paint the rest of the weights, so I will be back in a minute. So here we have a fully weighted model. At this stage, I would say this is a first pass on the skin weights. They aren't final just yet, but they are good enough that we can continue with the rigging process. The good thing about the weighting is that we can continue to tweak the values as we build the rig, and also after it's finished, so don't worry if they aren't perfect just yet. Before we move on to the next video, I have a few final tips. First, it's a good idea to use the Prune Small Weights tool from time to time. This can be found here under the skin menu. This will remove any weights under a set value, So here it will remove any that are under 0.01. These are super small influences, so it's best to clear them out. All Maya will do is take any weights under this value and redistribute them to the surrounding joints. Next, and you should probably do this right at the end of the rigging process, once the rig is final, but remove any unused influences. Now Unreal will ignore any joints that don't have any weight values, so it's not essential, but it's just good housekeeping. Finally, back up the weights. Simply go to Deform, Export Weights to save them. Having a backup is essential because you never know, you might inadvertently break the skin weights, or, which has often happened to me, the weights just go wild for no reason. Okay, so we now have a model skinned so it deforms with the skeleton. Next, what we're going to do is move away from the creature briefly as we look at how to build your control icons. Okay, that's another video over. Thanks for watching right to the end, and make sure you also check out some of the other free videos and courses that I have available. You can find links to all these on the screen now and in the description below. Remember, to help support future content and keep these videos free, visit the antCGi store or join the antCGi club. Alternatively, if you would just like to show your appreciation for these videos, why not treat me to a coffee at my coffee page? Again, the link is on the screen now and in the description below. Thanks again for watching. This is antCGi signing off, and I will see you on the next one.